It's a huge factor for your own perception of reality, meeting a different being.
The whole planet deserves to know the truth. You may be one of the few people who might be able to help us understand.
Species are brought together on a table and have diplomatic conversations
This
with
is
each other.
happening?
This is happening.
Where? Give an example. What happened with you?
This great being enters the room. It's a strong, crisp frequency that your body reacts to.
It's happening. It's happening behind the scenes. I mean, Tim, what is the true history of Earth?
Former NASA employee Ken Johnston recently released a series of doctored images to prove that NASA had manipulated photographs to conceal unexplained structures and anomalies on the lunar surface. He asserts that NASA knows that astronauts discovered ancient alien cities on the moon and is covering up this amazing discovery. Johnston's claims. Ken Johnston, Sr. is a retired aerospace worker, ex-US Marine cadet, and most recently acclaimed NASA whistleblower. In 1971, Johnston was a consultant employed by Brown and Root in the Lunar Receiving Laboratory of the NASA Johnson Center. His job involved storing, curating, and cataloging Apollo images and moon rocks, as well as packaging and shipping lunar samples and photographs to various science labs. This work meant that he had in his office numerous sets of photographs taken by Apollo astronauts with their chest-mounted Hasselblad cameras. It was during his work with Brown and Root that Johnson claims that he saw NASA photo technicians doctoring lunar photos taken during Apollo missions to hide UFOs, unexplained structures, and anomalies on the moon's surface. When the program was ending, Johnston was told by his boss, Bud Laskower, to destroy what remained of the photo archive, but instead he kept one set of photographs without telling anyone. In 1995, Johnston met Richard Hoagland, American author and conspiracy theorist, at one of Hoagland's lectures, and the next day showed him his collection of lunar photos. Hoagland scanned the images on his scanner, then adjusted the results in Photoshop. It was then that he was able to make out strange marks and scratches on some of the scans, which he believed were anomalies on the lunar surface. Hoagland was extremely impressed, to say the least. In his 2007 book, Dark Mission: The Secret History of NASA, he wrote, "In scanning Ken's priceless Apollo 14 sea prints, discovered that the computer could see what the human eye could not. Incredible geometric detail in the pitch-black areas, like the lunar sky. The sensitivity of modern CCD imaging technology, in even commercially available image scanners, coupled with the amazing enhancements capabilities of state-of-the-art commercial software like Adobe's Photoshop, allowed the invisible detail buried in these supposedly black layers of these 30-year-old emulsions to ultimately be revealed. A democratization of technology that no censor at NASA could have possibly foreseen over more than 30 years ago." In June 2016, Johnson announced in a press release that he was donating some of these photographs and research material to Roswell's International UFO Museum and Research Center. The photos apparently showed lunar bases, satellite dishes, and other anomalies that are not seen on the glossy NASA photo archives. Johnston's almost complete set of first-generation copies of 10x8 glossy photographs from the Apollo program are alleged by him to show evidence of a lunar civilization that has since been removed from the official versions that are available to anyone, both online and as photo prints. In 2018, Ken Johnston published a book about his lunar photos and research, Ken's Moon, revealing the dark mission of NASA. The blurb for the book sums up Johnston's career as a NASA whistleblower. It says, "The story of Ken Johnston's archive of historic NASA photos and his decision to go public with evidence of the manipulation of those images from the Apollo moon missions is the stuff of legend in the alternative history community. At the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, Ken was the director of the Data and Photo Control Department, responsible for all photographs and the data generated by the contributing scientists from around the world. He also produced and edited the NASA Lunar Sample Information Catalog for each of the lunar landing missions. One day, Ken enters the room where he sees strange activity. Given that he feels a sense of responsibility for the integrity of the NASA collection, he inquires as to what is going on. He spoke with several people who call themselves strippers because they were stripping out details in lunar images that might be hard to explain. That day, they were at the task of painting out the stars in particular lunar images. He also found out that smudging out anomalies on images was commonplace. Ken's story could be counted as a minority report in NASA's branded panorama of American heroics. The US government and the American people had allocated significant financial and other resources towards the goal of reaching the moon at the behest of our young President Kennedy. The idea was to see what was there, to share that information with the world, and elevate the knowledge to mankind. To discover that the artifacts of that effort might have been manipulated was highly disappointing. It is this scenario being asserted by Ken Johnston, the very human being who at one time had watched over the chain of evidence. In May 2018, Johnston's second book was published, Regression of a NASA Whistleblower, Selections from a Regression Session with Commentary. Much of this work consists of material gained from Johnston in a hypnotic regression session conducted by Sasha and Janet Lessin in Scottsdale, Arizona in 2016. Problems in India. In a February 2017 interview with the New Indian Express, Johnston answered various questions regarding aliens and UFOs. In answer to the question how he had managed to get first-hand information about extraterrestrials, Johnston said, "Once we were done with the first 3 missions, I was put in charge of photographing and documenting their exact location. One day, my boss ordered me to destroy these images. I reminded him that the government had paid for them and that they should be made public, to which he replied, 'No, get rid of it. I don't care what you think.' There were elements in the pictures that were unexplainable. You can now download them for free from my website," he says. "You can see the lunar anomalies too. It looks like something has been smudged out. Way before Photoshop, they would paint things out. Once, when I walked into the photo lab, I saw a woman painting something out. She called herself a stripper and said that she was paid for it. He said, this really upset me as I was in charge of keeping a record of things. I guess that's why they call me a whistleblower." On the 12th of February 2017, the Hindu Times ran the headline, "NASA Astronaut Visits B.M. Birla Science Center." The NASA astronaut turned out to be none other than Ken Johnston, whom the newspaper described as a test astronaut who is also chief trainer at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, of the United States of America. The problem is, of course, that Johnston was never an astronaut and never a chief trainer of anyone. NASA soon found out about the imposter and informed the State Department that someone was in India posing as an astronaut and chief trainer at NASA. Within days, Johnston was asked to leave the country. In December 2015, another NASA whistleblower with similar stories to Johnston's hit the tabloid headlines, this time claiming that there were 3 flying saucers on the moon during one of the NASA lunar landings, but the whole episode had been covered up. A woman named Donna Hare claimed to have worked for computer and engineer contractor Philco Ford during the early 1970s in NASA's photo labs. She claimed to have had high level of security clearance and was thus able to access part of the building's headquarters known as Building 8, which gave her contact with a series of high-ranking officials who leaked her information in secret over lunch. Apparently, Hare was informed by sources that during one of the moon landings, astronauts had discovered 3 UFOs had landed there when they touched down. She claimed that one of her contacts had worked in a quarantine area where astronauts were debriefed after they returned home. She said, "This man was in quarantine with them and was part of their debriefing. He said a lot of them talked about their experience of the crafts following them." Philco Ford was an important contractor in the days of Apollo and afterwards as Ford Aerospace in the shuttle era. Hare also claimed that she was
I'll tell you what. I am the VIP player in State of Survival. I have 3 left.
was involved with photo processing of Philco Ford's work, some of which showed strange anomalies on the moon. Someone also informed her that there was a special room where photography experts airbrushed UFOs and other unexplained artifacts out of pictures. On another occasion, Hare was informed that UFOs had been responsible for crippling the Apollo 13 spacecraft in order to prevent it from reaching its intended landing area on the far side of the moon. Hare has, however, produced no proof to support any of her claims. One wonders what the real goal of such whistleblowers as Johnston is. Do they genuinely possess secret information?
It's a huge factor for your own perception of reality, meeting a different being.
The whole
During one of the moon landings, astronauts had discovered 3 UFOs had landed there when they touched down. She claimed that one of her contacts had worked in a quarantine area where astronauts were debriefed after they returned home. She said, "This man was in quarantine with them and was part of their debriefing. He said a lot of them talked about their experience of the crafts following them." Philco Ford was an important contractor in the days of Apollo and afterwards as Ford Aerospace in the shuttle era. Hare also claimed that she was involved with photo processing of Philco Ford's work, some of which showed strange anomalies on the moon. Someone also informed her that there was a special room where photography experts airbrushed UFOs and other unexplained artifacts out of pictures. On another occasion, Hare was informed that UFOs had been responsible for crippling the Apollo 13 spacecraft in order to prevent it from reaching its intended landing area on the far side of the moon. Hare has, however, produced no proof to support any of her claims. One wonders what the real goal of such whistleblowers as Johnston is. Do they genuinely possess secret information that they wish to make public, whatever the cost? Are they only in it for the fame and money? Or are they being guided by darker forces with a hidden agenda which we can only guess at? Canada's ex-defense minister, Paul Hellyer, has claimed that advanced alien technology exists and that they will give it to us if we stop all wars. Hellyer has long maintained that aliens have been visiting Earth for many decades and said that when aliens witnessed the atomic bomb, they decided that we were a huge threat to the cosmos. Apparently, the aliens are worried that Earth is going to use the bomb again and that this will affect the whole balance of the universe. Initial revelations. In April 2015, newspapers across the world ran a story stating that the then 19-year-old Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Defence Minister, claimed that the world's top leaders were hiding aliens from the human race. This was actually not as startling as it seemed at the time. Popular newspapers had previously published at least 2 similar stories about Hellyer's alien conspiracy theory in 2010, 2011 and in 2014. In fact, Hellyer had been speaking out publicly about aliens for decades. In 1967, Canada's centennial year, Hellyer went to St. Paul, Alberta, to officially inaugurate the world's first flying saucer welcome landing pad, which was built to celebrate the centennial. Weighing just over 130 tons, the large flat concrete structure contains a time capsule which will be opened on the 100th year anniversary of the pad's opening in 2067. In a Toronto Star article from May 2010 entitled "Paul Hellyer Defends Aliens After Stephen Hawking's Warning" that Hellyer had defended aliens after Stephen Hawking's warning, Hellyer had defended aliens after Professor Hawking had warned about that malevolent aliens might lead to the destruction of humanity. Hawking was talking about his theory that most extraterrestrial life will be similar to microbes or small animals, and added that advanced forms might be nomads looking to conquer and colonize new planets. Hellyer's reaction to Hawking's idea seems to have come from a misunderstanding of exactly what he meant when he said extraterrestrial. He said, "I think he's indulging in some pretty scary talk there that I would have hoped would not come from someone with such an established stature. I think it's really sad that a scientist of his repute would contribute to what I would consider more misinformation about a vast and very important subject." Hellier believes humans as a species owe a lot to aliens, especially in terms of technology, even though many people would find that difficult to accept. Aliens, he said, have been in contact with Earth for a very long time indeed. He said the reality is that aliens have been visiting Earth for decades and probably millennia and have contributed considerably to our knowledge. Microchips, for example, fiber optics, they're just two of the many things that allegedly, and probably for real, came from crashed vehicles. In a January 2014 interview aired on the Russia Today TV program, Hellier stated that aliens are already amongst us, but they refuse to share their advanced technologies unless we change our warlike and polluting ways. There are apparently 80 different species of aliens, according to Hellier, some of whom look exactly like humans. Most of these extraterrestrials come from other star systems, although there are some living on Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moon. The majority of species are peaceful and want to help humans, although there may be one or two species which do not, and have ulterior motives for visiting Earth. Hellier also discussed a Star Trek-like federation of aliens that has a rule not to interfere in the affairs of Earth. He went on to describe how the aliens are concerned about the direction in which humanity is heading. We have a long history of UFOs, and of course there's been a lot more activity in the last few decades since we invented the atomic bomb. They're very concerned about that, and that we might use it again, because the whole cosmos has a unity, and it affects not just us, but other people in the cosmos. They're very much afraid that we might be stupid enough to start using atomic weapons again. Hellier has also called on world leaders to confess to an alleged conspiracy, which he believes includes information about alien ships and how at least 4 different kinds of alien have visited Earth. Hellier also believes the world's elite possess the technology to reverse the effects of climate change, if they so desired, but not to do so as the Illuminati wants to help the petroleum industry. In February 2018, Hellier said in an interview with a UK tabloid newspaper, "You have got a secret cabal that's actually running the world, and they've managed to keep this technology under wraps until they can cash in on the trillions of oil assets that they've got. And it's not going to change until hundreds of thousands of people band together and say, look, you've got to come clean, tell us what is going on, and change your priorities to save the world for further generations instead of blowing it on wars." A story published as recently as March 2021 reiterated Hellier's main ET claims, adding a few details such as a Cold War incident involving aliens. In one of the cases during the Cold War in 1961, there were about 50 UFOs in formation flying south from Russia across Europe. The Supreme Allied Commander was very concerned and was about to press the panic button when they turned around and went back over the North Pole. They decided to do an investigation, and they investigated for 3 years and decided that with absolute certainty 4 different species at least have been visiting this planet for thousands of years. There's been a lot more activity in the past 2 decades, especially since we invented the atomic bomb. He again mentioned the aliens' concern at the directions Earth was taking due to constant wars and the destructive potential of nuclear weapons. We are ruining our planet. We're doing all sorts of things that we shouldn't be doing, and they don't like that. They've made it clear, and they have given us a warning. Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about the direction we were heading in and offered to help. Instead, some of us interpreted their visits as a threat and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. It's ironic that the US should be fighting monstrously expensive wars, allegedly to bring democracy to those countries, when it itself can no longer claim to be called a democracy when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars, have been spent on black projects which both Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark. Reddit claims. In March 2020, the then 95-year-old Hellier started a discussion on the social news and discussion website Reddit. In this discussion, Hellier answered various questions about extraterrestrials and UFOs from various Reddit users. In answer to a question about his personal experience with aliens, Hellier said that he had only been in direct contact once, when he was encouraged to keep up the good work he was doing. On this occasion, he was also informed that there were 8 different species working together with individuals like himself who were involved with disclosure and spreading the truth about ETs. Hellier also claimed that the aliens enhanced his ability to communicate telepathically. In answers to the questions why the aliens haven't so far publicly announced their existence and why they haven't shared their incredible advanced technology, Hellier said, "Some have. Valiant Thor, the benevolent Venusian with an IQ of 1200, lived in the Pentagon for 3 or 4 years, offering us Earthlings a richer, healthier life in exchange for giving up our nuclear weapons. His offer was not accepted. They shared their technology, and both the US and Russia have adopted it for military purposes. Some has spilled over, including microchips used in our smartphones. Unfortunately, we could have had more in agriculture and medicine, for example, if we had abandoned our warlike ways." One Reddit user asked Hellier the question why he was allowed to speak out on the subject of aliens and ET technology, whilst the governments of the world kept these matters secret. Was he breaking any Official Secrets Act, for which he could be prosecuted? Hellier answered, "Governments, especially the US government, have been working with several species for decades and knows an incredible amount about them. They have spent billions denying the existence of UFOs, ETs, and their incredible characteristics. Only in recent days have former US defense officials admitted the reality of UFOs. I personally wonder about their motives. Unlike some whistleblowers, I have broken no oaths. All my information has been gained from interviews and documents that have come my way, but our discussion today has barely scratched the surface on these subjects. You need to read credible books, my books and others." In fact, Hellier's repeated answer in the Reddit conversation, "You'll have to read my book to discover the truth," persuaded some readers that his contributions were essentially promotion for his latest book, Hope Restored, an autobiography by Paul Hellier, My Life and Views on Canada, the US, the World and the Universe. Unfortunately, most readers have failed to find the answers they were looking for in that book.
There are 2 types of lizard or reptilian kind of beings. When they appear on Earth, they try to do it covertly. Some come from a totally different reality, others come from different planets. They all have their own agenda.
When we had EBA 1 in captivity from 1947, 1952, one of the big questions was, do you have a soul? EBA 1 said, absolutely I have a soul. It is eternal.
There are phenomena going on. We also have different life forms, and the Pentagon reports acknowledge that. So when Earth enters a full harmonious level 4 consciousness, those things will appear and they will affect everyone. And we can see that there are some forces on this planet, extraterrestrial forces, that try to ascend humanity faster.
Many people were shocked by the deathbed revelations of Ben Rich, the former director of Lockheed's Skunk Works, a secret research and development facility. Rich claimed that UFOs were alien spacecraft and that extraterrestrial visitors were real. Furthermore, he stated that their craft were in some way controlled by the powers of the mind through a combination of ESP, extrasensory perception, and psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with the power of thought. Naturally, the skeptics scoffed at his claims. This is understandable, since the idea that spacecraft could ever be controlled by thought alone certainly sounds preposterous. But in recent years, R&D projects exploring the integration of mind with machine have progressed by leaps and bounds, revealing the possible legitimacy of science fiction scenarios such as the one proposed by a dying Ben Rich. One intriguing result of this research is the creation of a small, high-tech helicopter that can be guided and propelled through the intentional regulation of brainwaves. Whether mind-controlled UFOs are real or not, we can now say with certainty that thought-powered flight is both a possibility and a reality. Mind control in flight. In 2013, a team of researchers at the University of Minnesota's Institute for Engineering in Medicine wanted to test the theory that thought patterns could be detected and decoded by computers, and then used to direct mechanical responses. To achieve their goals, they built a tiny 4-blade helicopter designed to be controlled exclusively by thought, in a manner of speaking. This experiment in advanced robotics was not motivated by a desire to harness latent psychic powers. Instead, its purpose was to reveal how brains can be linked to computers through software that interprets information contained within brainwaves. Subsequently, that data can be used as a guide when sending instructions to remotely controlled mechanical devices, telling them where or how to move, or telling them to perform some other type of action. To facilitate the mind-computing interface, subjects were fitted with specially designed caps that could measure brainwave activity, generating data in the form of an EEG. The EEG is normally ordered as a medical test for neurological disorders, but in this case, the data collected was redirected by a wireless signal to an electronic control system inside the helicopter. This system was programmed to respond to the thought patterns revealed by the EEG, and after some trial and error style learning, it was up to the human controllers to change their thoughts to receive the required responses. After some practice, the 5 test subjects who volunteered for this study managed to navigate the helicopter through foam rings scattered around an indoor course. Visual feedback was provided by the helicopter's onboard camera, and by following images projected on a screen, the subjects were able to move the helicopter horizontally and vertically, right or left, simply by focusing their minds and thoughts on the task at hand. Our study shows that for the first time, humans are able to control the flight of flying robots using just their minds, sensed from non-invasive brainwaves, proclaimed Bin He, a professor in the University of Minnesota College of Science and Engineering and the lead scientist in the study. While these results generated much publicity, this research project was not the first to demonstrate the capacity of the human brain to control flying objects remotely. In 2012, scientists in China designed an EEG-based computer interface that allowed test subjects to control the flight of a hovering drone. Inspired by both achievements, private sector developers from a Portuguese tech firm launched a project called BrainFlight in 2015. Using an EEG-based control system, test subjects were trained on flight simulators for both manned and unmanned vehicles. Eventually, they were able to translate their newfound mind-over-matter skills to control the flight of a real unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV. The Portuguese company hopes its brain-computer-machine interface technology can eventually be applied to other types of transportation, including conventional aircraft, airplanes and helicopters, cars, boats and trains. One advantage of such a system is that it could be used by people with physical disabilities, whose minds remain unaffected by their other limitations. Mind control in robotics. 3 years after successfully teaching volunteers to fly a tiny helicopter with the power of their minds, Bin He and his research team at the University of Minnesota achieved yet another important milestone. Applying the same brainwave detection technology to robotics, they taught 8 subjects how to manipulate a robot arm with nothing more than mental input. Fitted with EEG caps that could transmit signals, the subjects were able to move the robot arm by imagining the movements of their own arms. Over time, they learned how to control the hand movements of the robot arm as well, which allowed them to pick up objects and move them to new locations. This is the first time in the world that people can operate a robotic arm to reach and grasp objects in a complex 3D environment, using only their thoughts without a brain implant, Bin He declared. 3 years ago, we weren't sure moving a more complex robotic arm using this brain-computer interface, the one developed for the mini-helicopter, could ever be achieved, he continued. We're happily surprised that it worked with a high success rate. A year after Bin He and his research team announced these results, engineers and developers affiliated with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Computer Science and Intelligence Lab decided to take things one step further. They used EEG-based interface technology to train volunteers to direct the activities of a full-size robot named Baxter, who had been designed to perform a variety of physical tasks. This project proved highly successful, showing that brain-computer-machine interface systems can be scaled up to a more complex level. Exploring the horizons of the mind. The implications of this type of technology are limitless. A mind-computer-machine interface could be used to assist or augment cognitive or sensory motor functions in those with disabilities, either in coordination with prosthetic devices or through mind-to-mind relationships established with helper robots. Such an interface would allow for remote control of machines assigned to tackle tasks that carry high risk for humans. Additionally, it could be used aboard spacecrafts to help astronauts carry out a wide variety of assignments with the assistance of sophisticated machine technology that could be deployed outside the craft or down on planetary surfaces. What we've been exploring here is quite different from psychokinesis or from UFOs controlled directly by thought. Nevertheless, a fully developed technology that integrates thought with computer, with machine, would expand human capabilities far beyond anything previously imagined. The outcomes it could produce might just be as impressive as anything imagined by any science fiction writer or paranormal enthusiast once the technology is perfected. Secret Space Force, super soldiers, native Martians? Rumors have speculated about these for as long as we can remember, especially since hacker Gary McKinnon tapped into the secret files of the US military and NASA. His desire was to discover the US authorities' knowledge about the UFO phenomenon, but during McKinnon's illicit surveillance that took place for years, he unearthed a strange mix of information, and all of it concerned UFO technology, anti-gravity, and most astonishing of all, the existence of a fully funded and secret force intended to wage war in deep space and perhaps on other planets. There have been claims of bases residing on the moon since the late 1950s, when the US Army and Air Force declared their intention to create permanent manned bases there. These bases would allow them to obtain a clear military advantage. After hearing what Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin witnessed during their Apollo 11 mission, these claims are not as wild as they first appear. While on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin allegedly saw an enormous spacecraft lined up on the rim of a crater opposite them. Naturally, none of this brief conversation was ever released by NASA. There have been many claims, both for and against this possibility. However, there are individuals who not only claim to have knowledge of such bases, but also allege that they have been there. This possibility becomes even more credible when Donald Trump spoke about establishing a sixth branch of the American military in 2018, perhaps the US Space Force. This wasn't the only hint. On 3 separate occasions in the 80s, US President Ronald Reagan also hinted at this. Reagan said that in the event of an extraterrestrial threat, we would soon forget all the domestic and territorial issues to join together to defeat such a threat. Could this be an agenda to prepare the public for something greater? Perhaps the best information comes from someone who not only claimed to have been in one of these bases, both on the moon and on Mars, but was also part of a secret project designed to protect planet Earth from invasion. That man was Randy Allen Kramer. Most dismiss this as a hoax, but there are key details that give validity to the story. Kramer appeared on many TV shows talking about his experiences. He said that he was first recruited into the secret space program in 1970, aged 4, as part of a military abduction. Kramer claimed that this program was named Project Moonshadow. Prior to being recruited, he had a series of what he assumed were vivid nightmares. However, it was later revealed that these were deliberately induced in his brain to see if he was a suitable candidate for the program. Out of 3.7 billion people on the planet in the 70s, why was Kramer chosen out of everyone else? Actually, Kramer wasn't the only one to be tested. He claimed to have been one of 300 people secretly inducted into the program. At night, he was taken from his bed to isolated training camps for days, sometimes weeks. Interestingly, he was always returned to his bed when these training sessions finished, and he awoke as normal with no sense of time passing. What occurred during this time away? Later, Kramer became part of a top-secret project, this time the creation of fearsome super soldiers. This involved subjecting the candidates to all kinds of revolutionary, psychological and physical conditioning, including the use of implants. However, this didn't occur until the latter stages of the program of various kinds because of the obvious physical changes these implants produced. What these modifications did do, however, was make him and his colleagues into virtually unstoppable biological machines. Once they had completed their duty, all of the implants were removed. Kramer spoke of other aspects of this project. A different kind of super soldier was developed using fetuses altered through genetic engineering. These were cheaper to produce than machines and had a limited lifespan. Thus, they were expendable and intended for short-term use in extremely hazardous off-world environments. Why were parents giving permission for their children to be taken? They weren't. Time travel was used to avoid raising the concerns of the children's parents and, of course, the unwelcome interest of civil authorities. It wasn't until 1987 that Kramer was finally fully inducted into the Space Force as part of the Mars Defense Force. The Mars Defense Force was intended to guard 5 civilian settlements. Each of these were established to facilitate mining operations. Prior to his deployment on Mars, he was taken to one of the bases on the Moon. Kramer learned that, surprisingly, this unit had been established since the early 1950s. On Mars, he finally signed his enlistment papers that led to him spending a total of 20 years there. This deployment was part of an elite group of Space Marines who were, in turn, part of an ultra-secret branch of the US Marine Corps. It's important to realize that this Space Force is a joint effort involving Russia, Germany, and China, as well as the USA. Although these countries don't get along particularly well, it's likely that in the event of an extraterrestrial threat to the planet, they would have to work together to defeat it, and so the forces are part of the Cooperative Alliance. When Kramer arrived on Mars, he was assigned to a base located in the far north of the planet called Ares Prime. It was here he discovered that not only is there an atmosphere on Mars, but it is breathable. However, he had to wear a face mask, otherwise breathing would be unbearably uncomfortable. Ares Prime is the largest of the Martian bases. The military section of this base is designated as Forward Station Zebra. This is where he spent his time. During his stay, he learned that authorities on Earth are aware of at least 50 different species of extraterrestrial, the majority of which have different forms of space travel. Actually, there were several reasons why these bases had been established. Although they were primarily intended to see if the human race could not only survive, but also thrive off-planet, there were other reasons too. One was to establish the previously mentioned Defense Force. The others were to claim Mars as US territory, and incredibly to familiarize the Martians with people from planet Earth. Apparently, there are 2 intelligent species on the Red Planet. One is reptilian, and the other is an insect-based life form. Although Kramer was initially told that they were hostile to each other and to humans, this was just propaganda. The truth was quite different. Both species were intelligent and highly evolved, and each had its own cultures and beliefs. Most species inhabited in hives below ground. Initially, the indigenous Martians treated the humans as neighbors and had no apparent interest in conflict. But of course, there were still some minor clashes. Given that the environment was hostile and unforgiving to all species, they eventually agreed that conflict was not the way forward, so a peace treaty was drawn. Humans agreed to respect the customs and traditions of the native Martians, and that, in the best interests of all concerned, they would join forces to defeat another reptilian race called the Draconians, who planned to invade Mars. This agreement resulted in a successful joint battle. Kramer revealed that the Space Force was able to recover various weapons that could be reverse engineered for use in the Space Force. Shortly before his departure from Mars, a group of Marines received orders to enter a reptoid hive to recover an artifact of some kind. Kramer was aware that this would break the terms of the treaty, risking conflict. When he asked about this, he was told that these were direct orders from headquarters and they had no choice. A team of 50 Marines entered the underground tunnels, leading to a large open area resembling a huge arena. The artifact they were required to remove was on a pedestal in the center of the arena. When they arrived, reptoids rushed out of the doors carrying scythe-like weapons. A fierce hand-to-hand battle took place, which resulted in 25 men of Kramer's group being killed. They did, however, retrieve the artifact, which Kramer described as looking like ancient technology, but he never disclosed its use. Despite being badly wounded, he managed to get out and spent several weeks in the base hospital. It was here that his commanding officer offered him a chance to get off Mars and become a pilot ferrying equipment to and from the moon. After recovering, Kramer left Mars for good and spent his final 3 years in the secret space program as a pilot. As his service came to an end, he remained on the moon for 4 months, undergoing a de-aging process to prepare him for his return to Earth. During this process, his implants were removed along with his memories of his time in space. Eventually, Kramer was returned to his original timeline in 1987. So how do we know all of this information? Well, gradually some of the repressed memories started to resurface. The story told by Kramer is truly remarkable. Ever since, other sources claiming to have served on Mars have come forward with their own experiences. However, most served at different times and were unaware of each other until Kramer went public. This triggered their own recall of the events that they had experienced. A common feature between all of them was the use of a portal that permitted almost instantaneous transfer between different interplanetary locations. They claimed that they had communicated with native Martians using a form of telepathy. Supposedly, telepathy was just one of their many super soldier enhancements. Kramer has been determined to get his message out to the public, making us aware of the secret space program, as well as the ongoing cover-up about extraterrestrial life and the existence of planet bases on the Moon and Mars. But are Randy Kramer's brave revelations enough for the truth to be told?
Is our government in the possession of a crash retrieval that was made not on planet Earth?
We have a pretty good idea where those things were taken. It's not a secret anymore that those things have been retrieved. They've been retrieved all over the world by special teams. They've been taken to the best labs.
The Ukrainian researchers said, we see these UAP under all kinds of visible conditions, a lot of the time in lots of different locations.
We also have the Webb telescope that can look at such an object from a different direction than the observatories on Earth.
The myths are consistent with oftentimes referred to as the gods.
And there's a lot more going on here, not just on this planet, but on other planets.
I think this is the Ark of the Covenant.
There were actually multiple arcs.
History isn't what we've been taught, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Just before we start, a quick shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. As conspiracy theories go, believing that the moon is hollow is up there with thinking that it's made out of cheese.
Everybody knows the moon's made of cheese.